Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 84th episode of In the Trenches, Kroll's weekly cyber threat intelligence briefing. Today is the 21st of January, and my name is George Glass, an Associate Managing Director in the Cyber Threat Intelligence team. Joining me today is Ryan Hicks. As always, we'll be covering the most recent trends our threat intelligence team is witnessing in the trenches. So let's get into the SITREP. First up, we published an out-of-band advisory for CVE 2024-55591 affecting FortiOS and FortiProxy. The vulnerability has a CVSS score of 9.8 and has been exploited in the wild. Potentially impacted customers should seek further guidance from the full report. Next up, more malicious packages are being pushed to NPM. This one has a bit of a twist though. Snyk, a security company focusing on application secure development, has been observed adding malicious packages to JavaScript's prominent open source repository, NPM. The malicious packages were spotted by an Australian security company, Source Code Red, which provides similar services. The packages act as similar to information stealers in that they would collect and exfiltrate data about the running system, including environment variables, which are often used to hold data such as private keys. 3 packages impacted. Their names are Cursor Retrieval, Cursor Always Local, and Cursor Shadow Workspace, which have since been removed. The packages were named in such a way as to likely be performing a dependency confusion attack against Cursor, the AI code editor. Snyk has since apologized to the company behind Cursor after the co-founder stated that Snyk may have been performing research, albeit in a, quote, pretty irresponsible manner. Snyk has confirmed it was doing research into dependency confusion within VS Code extensions and that no one picked up this package yet. Snyk's statement indicated is likely no organization was affected by this, but an interesting story nonetheless, and an increase in the use of NPM for the deployment of malicious packages, which we've been reporting on quite a lot over the last few years. Next up, some ransomware news. 59 victims of the Cleo exploitation have been released by the ransomware organization Clop. 59 organizations from the zero-day vulnerability breach. At the time of writing, no files are available to download for these companies. Clop included in its post that the victim organizations have until Friday, January 17th, or the data will be published. Kroll will continue to monitor the group to analyze any further data. Last up, FastHTTP has been utilized in high-speed Microsoft 365 password spray attacks. Researchers have uncovered a campaign utilizing the FastHTTP Go library to launch high-speed brute force attacks against Microsoft 365 accounts globally. The attacks began on January 6th, 2025, targeting the Azure Active Directory Graph API. FastHTTP is an HTTP server and client library optimized for improving throughput, low latency, and high efficiency, even when used with numerous concurrent connections. In the campaign, it was leveraged to automate malicious login attempts, targeting Azure Active Directory endpoints to either brute force passwords or repeatedly send MFA challenges to OMWL targets in MFA fatigue attacks. 65% of the malicious traffic originated from Brazil, leveraging a broad range of ASN providers and IP addresses. What is significant is that despite authentication failures, account lockouts, access policy violations, and MFA failures, the attackers managed to successfully authenticate 9.7% of cases, a notably high success rate. Remember, if you have any questions or comments, please get in touch with us using cti@kroll.com. That's cti@kroll.com. So let's get into the rest of today's briefing. Today, we're going to cover the following items. I'll be covering a new Fortinet development, and I also have the Patch Tuesday update for you. Ryan will be covering a macOS vulnerability and the Ransomware Roundup. So first of all, Fortinet. It's been a tricky couple of weeks for Fortinet customers. This time, it's a breach affecting FortiGate firewall users. On January the 14th, 2025, a new threat actor using the moniker Belson Group posted a data dump of FortiGate firewall configurations. The data dump contains a 1.6 gigabyte archive containing 15,574 folders. Each folder name contains compromised configuration files, in the name format IP_port. Our analysis thus far suggests that the data is likely collected from mass exploitation of CVE 2022-40684 and was likely collected between 2022 and 2023. It is not related to the recent exploitation of CVE 2024-55591, which I mentioned earlier. Near-term exploitation of this information is likely going to take place. You can see on the right-hand side there a screenshot of the data leak site. We continue to analyze the data and looking at the distribution of overall victims based on IP geolocation. The leak represents approximately 1.8% of all FortiGate firewalls that are still available on Showdown, bearing in mind that this is a couple of years old now. The geographic distribution reveals a highly concentrated number of devices located in the United Arab Emirates, Mexico, the US, Australia, and the Netherlands. An analysis of the host names indicate that many firewalls are being hosted with shared VPS providers or business telecom services, which makes identification more difficult. However, Kroll notes that the list contains host names and indicate victims span a wide range of verticals, including government, energy, pharmaceutical, and professional services. As I said before, we anticipate that the data will be weaponized in the short term. It's been confirmed that some of these VPN logins do still work, and bearing in mind that is a username and password that is provided in a number of these cases as well. It's important to consider a digital risk protection service to proactively alert on compromised data leaking to the internet. Ensure that FortiGate firewalls are fully patched and up to date. Security researcher Amram Englander has made a list of impacted IPs publicly available on GitHub. The list can be used to verify whether the WAN interface of the firewall is included in the leak. And of course, we also have a copy of that should you want to get in touch with us. Finally, consider rotating all credentials for Fortinet firewalls. Clearly, this breach is a couple of years old, but we've confirmed that some of the usernames and passwords still work, some of those for admin accounts. So those credentials should be rotated. Next up, let's talk about Patch Tuesday, the 1st of 2025. We have 162 vulnerabilities addressed. 3 of them Microsoft assess has been exploited in the wild, 3 criticals, 40 privilege escalation, and 58 remote code executions. So let's take a look at the zero-day exploits. There's 3 of them: CVE 2025 21333, 21334, and 21335, with a CVSS score of 7.8. They affect the Windows Hyper-V NT kernel integration, and it's a privilege escalation vulnerability. According to Microsoft, successful exploit gains the attacker system privileges, but does not allow a guest to host escape in the traditional Hyper-V context. That's very important nuance, and probably is why the CVSS score is what it is. Microsoft stated that the vulnerabilities have been exploited in the wild, but did not share any additional details on the exploitation it has observed or any additional technical details. But of course, we will continue to monitor for more information. Some of the critical vulnerabilities, these are really quite important. The first one is CVE 2025-21298 with a CVSS score of 9.8, and this is an OLE remote code execution vulnerability. According to Microsoft, in an email attack scenario, an attacker could exploit the vulnerability by sending a specially crafted email to the victim. Exploitation of the vulnerability might involve either a victim opening a specially crafted email with an attached version of Microsoft Outlook software, an affected version of Microsoft Outlook software, or a victim's Outlook application displaying a preview of the specially crafted email. It's important to note there, because it can be exploited via the preview pane, this is considered a zero-click vulnerability and therefore requires little to no user interaction to be exploited. Microsoft does offer some workarounds aside from patching, although of course we recommend that, which is to ensure that emails are rendered in plain text instead of rich text format. More information is available in the full report for that. Next up is CVE 2025-21307, another 9.8, and this is an RMcast remote code execution vulnerability. And according to Microsoft, an unauthenticated attacker could exploit the vulnerability by sending specially crafted packets to a Windows Pragmatic General Multicast open socket on the server. There's more technical details in the report on this, but there are some interesting mitigations here. It's certainly not ubiquitously deployed, and it would really involve a misconfiguration on the victim's part for this to be reliably exploited. And finally, CVE 2025-21311, again another 9.8. This is an NTLM v1 elevation of privilege vulnerability, and Microsoft did not provide any additional details about this vulnerability. I think it's important to include this because NTLM v1 is very, very out of date. It's considered insecure, and efforts should be made to stop using this protocol as soon as possible. I have 3 other vulnerabilities at the bottom here. All of them affect Microsoft Excel and are remote code execution vulnerabilities, and a security feature bypass vulnerability, which allows the execution of potentially malicious macros without providing the user with a splash screen or a warning page. Again, very little information on these from the Microsoft reporting, but we are actively tracking these. Microsoft lists these as more likely to be exploited, so we are tracking any actors actively discussing this in the underground. And that's all from me. I will hand over to Ryan to take us through the macOS vulnerability and the ransomware roundup. Over to you, Ryan.
Hey, George. So yeah, a local macOS vulnerability, CVE 2024-44243, was found in the storage daemon, allowing attackers with root privileges to bypass system integrity protection, also known as SIP. SIP is a core macOS security feature designed to prevent unauthorized modification of protected system components. And successful exploitation of this flaw could enable attackers to load malicious kernel extensions, deploy persistent malware, or bypass transparency, consent, and control checks to access data. The vulnerability was addressed in macOS Sequoia 15.2, which was released on December 11th, 2024. Now, attackers with local root access can exploit this flaw to disable protection. So the key point here really is that it would be a post-compromise exploitation. And previous similar vulnerabilities include Shrootless and Migraine, highlighting the recurring nature of these SIP-related issues in macOS. And listed there below the bottom are a few recommendations for this, including updating against this vulnerability, of course, as well as a few general good practices to identify anomalous or malicious behavior. Next slide, please. And so go on to the Ransomware Roundup, just covering the first topic here. So a campaign by a new group dubbed Codefinger Ransomware has been observed abusing Amazon Web Services to encrypt the contents of S3 buckets. And the group used publicly disclosed or previously compromised AWS keys, and those keys had permissions to read and write S3 objects. And they initiated the process or the start of this compromise by calling that XAMZ's header you see there, whilst using their own AES-256 key that they generated. So when this request is processed, AWS does not store the key itself, rather a hash-based message code, meaning that administrators are unable to decrypt the data afterwards, as the key itself is not logged, rather that kind of hash code. The group also marked the encrypted files for deletion within 7 days, and a ransom note was placed in each affected directory within S3. So for this, it's recommended to regularly audit AWS credentials. As I said, this one was largely due to AWS keys being accessible in some form to the public. Also tightening IAM policies, which are the identity and access controls, and also, as I said, minimizing the exposure where possible of particularly sensitive AWS keys, but preferably all AWS keys. And then just to finish off, hand over to Sarah just to cover FunkSec.
Thanks, Ryan. So FunkSec ransomware has been in the news a lot lately. We initially reported on them in December, and the ransomware itself is a file encrypting malware that's written in Rust, and it is now likely created with the use of AI. So FunkSec participates in a double extortion campaign under their RAS ransomware as a service model. Researchers, when kind of analyzing this ransomware, discovered that the group's AI tactics by the group members or affiliates linking the ransomware development to AI in some messages, as well as the ransomware group advertising an AI chatbot on their data leak site to support these kinds of operations. So according to those researchers, the individuals behind FunkSec appear to have extensively leveraged AI to enhance their capabilities, as evidenced by the publications and tools. Their public script offerings include extensive code comments with perfect English as opposed to very basic English in other mediums, likely generated by an LLM large language model agent. So with this kind of AI generation and the group utilizing this AI-assisted malware development, this is now allowing inexperienced threat actors or affiliates to kind of take this ransomware, create it, and repurpose any of these advanced tools at a much faster rate. That's all for me, guys.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Sorry I missed you off the beginning there. I thought Ryan was doing the whole ransomware roundup, so it's always good to have a lovely surprise at the end. And yeah, thanks to Ryan as well. That's all we have time for this week. If you have any questions or comments, please do reach out to us using cti@kroll.com. That's cti@kroll.com. Have a wonderful day.